Take it away, Joe.
All right. Welcome, Tokers and Tokettes. We are back for another week of In the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio, live streaming from our Facebook account, guys. Any questions, any comments, please just round them up. We are here. We are very excited for today's show. We're going to sit down and speak with the Campanella of Brothers Grimm Seeds and the infamous Cinderella that we all talk about. It seems like the strain that was here went away, and now it's back, and it's we all really talk about right now. We talk about it everywhere. A few weeks ago, I was just fortunate enough to get my hands on the Brothers Grimm Seeds, which we can talk about. So we're very excited about today's show, guys. Again, Rick Campanella of Brothers Grimm Seeds will be joining us. On the show as well today, we have our co-host, Barberio, and Thomas Marco of the Montreal Coaching, who will be doing our show down a little bit later. Typically, we have a Timothy Farrell from Vermont Cannabis Solutions. We don't see him here today. Typically, we need to do some research and stuff with other guys. So Timothy Farrell, guys, yeah, we love him. Hoping to be continuing the show. But he does his own week law segment where we go over all the laws, interviews, things that you make yourself aware of as you're doing on the stage. Guys, the laws are not what you see. Kind of understand something. And we have plenty of bust lately that will explain this in New Hampshire, in Vermont, all over the country where people are getting busted with trying to do thinking that it's just illegal, right? But again, there's no legalities. We're coming to the grower season, so we're all excited to get these beans sprouting and into the ground and our outdoor growers going. Thomas has been very busy working hard educating you guys on a bunch of tips, a bunch of issues, a bunch of things like that. People looking for clones. We're going to have a great conversation today about all that kind of fun stuff. But first and foremost, guys, we're really excited to talk to you. You've been watching this for a long time. You produce this content. You out on social media. You educating people, which is what we strive to do here. And you have a great story. So I'd like to welcome Rick to the show. Rick, tell everybody a little bit about who you are and how you started out in this thing, because you have an amazing story.
Certainly kind of a unique one and unusual and breaks the stoner stereotype, because I was studying for a degree in nuclear engineering when I got interested in growing my own. And I was in my early 20s, and I bought a book that I sent away for it through iTimes Magazine's classified section or something, Jorge Cervantes' Indoor Marijuana Cultivation. And so during the next couple of years of finishing my undergraduate, and then I got a master's degree, and I obviously stayed on for graduate school. During that time, I struck up a pen pal relationship with Taish, the guy who was running Super Sativa Seed Club. And at that time, you have to put yourself back in a time capsule. We're talking about mid-1980s, 55, 56, 57. There were only two seed companies to buy cannabis seeds from in the world at that time. One of them was the Seed Bank that was run by Neville Schoenmacher, and then there was Taish and his gang over at Super Sativa Seed Club. I chose to get my seeds from the Super Sativa Seed Club when I ordered the first time, and then through this communications by writing, it was like a pen pal relationship. We said, right, stay before the internet was this. And he seemed to like what he saw in me and what I was writing to him, and he said, you might be the right kind of guy, but when you get out of college, would you like to work with us? I said, yeah, absolutely. And so that launched my career as a breeder and grower beyond just being curious in college and having a grow in my closet. So I had also been breeding in another way. As a child, I had guinea pigs from the age of about 11, and for at least 3 years, and watched the progression out there offspring and read about what was going on. I'm a scientific-minded person in the first place, so it was kind of the right building blocks that in life that works that way a lot of times. So you don't know it at the time, but you're putting building blocks in place for something that's going to do later in life. And so as a child, I was learning genetics and breeding without really thinking about it. And then later, and I realized that it was something that I was passionate about cannabis. It all made sense to me, and it wasn't so difficult for me to figure out what to do. And it's remarkable to me because sometimes I now find myself giving seminars on seeds, breeding, different subjects, and I take a lot for granted, and that's one of the ways I learned to improve myself in presenting the subject to the public. When I do talk to them, I start to think about, well, what things am I taking for granted so that I don't get to the end of an explanation about feminized seeds and have somebody say something so simple like, why is growing the female is more important than the male? You know, something so basic that you just assume they knew all along. And so this being the kind of person that I am, I guess one thing led to another with having available to me, I should say, the genetics from Super Sativa Seed Club and being a distributor for them. I was learning about how the seed business works as well as growing and breeding. I got married a couple years into this thing and gave up the Super Sativa Seed Club gig and spent about 5 years having kids and eventually getting divorced and moving to Europe and spent some time over there. And when I came back a couple years later, I started growing and breeding again, and I was living in Massachusetts, the Boston area, right on the beach. And that's where I built up Brothers Grimm Seeds company the first 5 years, and the creation of Cinderella 99, Apollo 13, and the other things that we offered. Stealth and Sly, who was my partner at the time, formed a partnership where we were breeding together, making seeds together, and having distributed through Heaven's Stairway in Canada, which was a connection that Sly was instrumental in creating. I wouldn't have known that guy and how to get my seeds through him to the public if it hadn't been for Sly. So it was a business side of the original formation of Brothers Grimm, and he's passed away since then, I think about 5 years. I talked to somebody not so long ago who knew him before and that he had passed away. Could be even more like 10 years. So that was the history of Brothers Grimm coming together as a seed company. And now fast forward through about 10 years of having shut down Brothers Grimm from the first time until now. I come out to Colorado in 2015 and find people and facilities that we could work together and create the company again. And it's been 5 years into it since we've reformed the company. And just recently, we now have a website, brothersgrimmseeds.com, and folks can actually buy our seeds direct from the breeder, which is an unusual thing. But we were able to figure out a way to do that. And so that's been really gratifying to see the response we get from it. And of course, we have great retailers who distribute for us in Europe and all around the world, and Canada. So it's just been, I guess the word's gratifying, to have come back from having been dormant for 10 years and reissue the things that people love, like Cinderella 99, and create even new ones, like Rosetta Stone, which was the top 10 in High Times 2018. So not so long ago, but we're still doing it. Anyway, I feel like I talked my face off, but I may have gone beyond just telling you who I am and what I do.
Well, Doug, the one thing that stands out,
you may have questions, eventually.
Oh yeah, well, we want to see your story first too. Like the one thing that stands out on me is your college, right? You went to school for nuclear engineering, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, and it's well known for being a top engineering college in the country. When I finished my undergraduate, I was number 2 in the class, and they gave me a full ride for a free master's degree. I could have gone on and done my PhD, but I was kind of antsy to get out and get a job and make money or whatever. So that was the college period. I did well. I really enjoyed being a scientist and being an engineer. I worked in parallel as a nuclear engineer professionally for 30 years. While
I'm trying. Shit's all fucked up. I'm trying to fix it. I don't understand what's going on.
Marijuana, this funny dichotomy to be able to, on one level, you're going to work every day, ready to do very serious work and work with very serious-minded people, and the evening before, you've been smoking weed. It's just. Especially at the time, in the late 80s, 90s, it was still a lot of stigma attached to being a pot smoker. And you weren't out yet. You know, I always say pot is the new gay, but because we're coming out now as they did before, and continue to do it. But the analogy seems to me true enough. You know, like if we were just like that, like we had this secret we were keeping in the closet, in the pot smoke.
But that was my next question for you. Was I mean, obviously, you've been in the industry a long time. You started off in the beginning of it with a lot of the seed benefits, right? So I mean, you have a different exposure to the industry. You're not like you're selling 4 hours direct on the street. You're dealing with the back end of it. But what's the biggest difference between the initial go around versus now that we're in like this legalization movement, where we're not completely legalized, which we're talking about before, some of the issues that even you have as a genetics guy with how it's legal, is it legal, can we sell seeds? This is a question we always have. And of last year, when the FDA and we were allowing hemp sales, right now that that's legal, seeds became a big issue at every event we went to. Like, there were seed sales being taken out of events because of the legality question, like we were talking before. 0% THC in a seed. But getting back to my original question though, is what is the biggest difference? Because, like you said, for us, we talk about a lot. The culture shift is now into the years. Our parents are more of our age. So, the generation slightly above us were the Prohibition stage, or the Reagan era people, right? They were, reefer madness people, right? My mom's a nurse, and she's not a cannabis fan. She has.
You probably benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, these are the stigmas we're trying to break, but as we go to events, we're starting to see, like, grandma and grandpa walk up to a table and be like, hey, Mike, because this.
Hey, I've always, felt like this was a discrimination against a plant, or culture based on false information, and that the truth would eventually set us free. My mother used to say, you're never going to, this stuff will never be legal, right? And you're wasting your time. And I said, Mom, it seems to me that logic will prevail eventually because you just can't bold-faced lie to people about something that for so long that you can fool some of the people some of the time, or how's it go? Some of the people all the time, and all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And eventually, the hypocrisy, is going to be exposed that they're saying things about this drug, and vilifying it, and by putting it as a category 1, I mean, that's like they shot themselves in the foot because eventually logic would have to say to you now, does it make sense that this plant is in the same category as heroin? And you start to have enough exposure over your life because there's another thing I've always believed, and that's that everybody smokes pot. Only certain people admit it. And to some degree, so there's always this underlying, I'd never like to admit that I smoke it too, but this guy seems to be making sense. I just can't agree with him in public. There was that. I remember getting emails in the 80s where NORML, the organization, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, is what it stands for, would send me emails, and I'd be a little leery about replying to them and everything because I'm thinking, like, this brother is watching if I'm sending an email to this organization that's trying to reform marijuana laws. So holding down the culture and the truth about marijuana was never going to be a permanent thing. You just couldn't hold that down. The truth would eventually come out. And that's what I see, what was the reason why there's cannabis becoming legal. And once that genie's out of the bottle and then the other element of greed kicks in and people see here's a way of making money, it's guaranteed to keep moving forward at that point. It's a slippery slope from that point. And right now, if this next ballot initiative is passed, aren't we going to be close to only having like a couple of states left that aren't legal, right? Like something like a handful, 5 or less.
Yeah, we have, medically, we have over 30 states right now that are medical. And the legalization, even through lockdown, we're seeing a lot of states hold back right now, right? They're pushing up all their laws and disciplines back, and other states are moving right forward. Like we're seeing Virginia
during the COVID.
Yeah.
What do we call this? Quarantine?
Yeah, the quarantine in 2020.
Right.
It's interesting to see how all the states and this is going to be a question I'm going to ask you. I might as well ask you right now while we're just going with it. Is the government's vision of what's going on? Like, there was a article that came out yesterday by Forbes saying that the administration is now talking about not legalizing.
Hey, Joe Biden's very anti-marijuana. Frankly, I'd be afraid. I'd be afraid of that guy.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid of him too. I don't want to get sniffed. But at least he's transparent where he stands, right? So his voters, everybody out there, literally has an idea that this is how he feels and this is it, right? The Trump administration, all I've seen is legalization. We're going to legalize. We want to legalize. We don't know how to legalize. Legalize. No, we're not going to legalize. We're not going to legalize. Wait, no, yeah. We are. No, we're not. Now we're in 2020, right? And now this is the year that we should be celebrating this because of everything going on now.
It should be a roller coaster ride by now.
Right? I mean, it seems like we had the train going. Obviously, COVID has derailed a lot of this train. But the fact is where does this administration stand? Like, we don't know.
It's ambiguous.
Right. I mean, does it go back to the states? Do we just deregulate? Do we just decriminalize it from a federal government standpoint, like the states do it? Does the states? This is a question I pretty much ask all of my guests, and I think my co-host kind of driving nuts with this. Is what's your opinion on should the government be involved with oversight for the states with setting up laws for medicinal purposes and transportation and delivery and stuff like that where they have minimal input into it? Or they set the guidelines, or should they just let the states do whatever the hell they want?
What do we do with alcohol? What do we do with other intoxicants, right?
Well, that's what my point comes in.
Especially when it's something that's part of your food culture. Because I look at cannabis as being part of like the food culture, your wine or your tea or your single malt scotch. These are all things that we use to adjust our moods that also have these high, the qualities, sublime qualities of aromas and flavors and part of the food experience of eating or drinking. Coffee, for example, is very marijuana is similar to coffee in the fact that yes, it's will alter your it's a mood enhancer or it's a drug. It'll have an effect on you, but it's not very powerful. It's not like you can knock yourself out or kill yourself like you could with alcohol, right? So for alcohol to be legal, and then add to that, of course, the smoking of cigarettes, right? When those two things are legal and marijuana isn't, that backs us up to the thing we were talking about earlier about how eventually logic has to prevail, and you can't say you're letting these two guys get on the ride, like alcohol and tobacco, and be okay when this lesser thing is being blocked. It's totally illogical and just boils down to some kind of a discrimination. Like
now that you all right, so here's the next step of my question, and you lined it perfectly up with it. We brought in the alcohol industry, and we talked about the tobacco industry, right, and the roles they play, how they play, the guidelines they play. Here in Vermont, we try to get the alcohol idea into the cannabis realm because it's a state run, it's state overseen. They have their own liquor store outlets. That's really controlled by the state, right? Some states that we see that are legalized right now do not have like a cannabis control commission on it. Which here in Vermont, we're not really legalized. I mean, I don't know how my guys would want to explain how we're legalized in Vermont. We're like partial legalization, so it's like, but there's no oversight. We have a dispensary system here in Vermont that's failing ridiculously for a multitude of reasons, and we don't have an oversight commission that actually will hold them accountable or make them close the door or fine them or whatnot when they are processing products and vice versa. And we're all over the country, but what we see all over the country is these boards step right in and shut them down, which is something very important. So for me, my question to you was, is, do we run it like we run the state alcohol sales, where the state is in control, or do we give it to our co-op farmers? I mean, here in Vermont, we have that the argument all the time, or I'll say New England, because Maine is pretty much in the same mindset of Vermont, I believe, right, guys? You all agree on that as far as quality and growth? Beautiful, right? Beautiful stuff. But, you know, like, I think our mentalities out here, we're like the cheeseheads. You know, we're about the craft. I mean, everybody's about the commercial. But, again, should we make this an agriculture commodity like corn and just let people grow and have their stand on the sidewalk? And if they want to get involved in a market, they can get their product to a certain point, or do we just have the state run it off? Like, that's where my biggest concern is, if we allow the states to take over.
Yeah, good discussion to lead me into, you know, just putting my opinion out there. I feel like after watching legalization set its foot in various states so far, I've never seen it done in a way that made any sense to me, or was like, it should be this way. But at the same time, I feel philosophically that the local control of an industry is always best, because it, like accents throughout a country, is particular to that region, and only the people in that area really know how to comprehend that accent and what things really mean. And so are the intricacies of each of those individuals' businesses. So, you know, Grandma Beatrice, who lives in Maine, who has a certain way of running her company, would never see a benefit in some organization like the state with a central planning commission deciding how her business should run and so on and so forth, because they're just not privy to all of the intricate details of how that business runs as well as she would be. So I feel cannabis is a plant, and like any other agricultural product, I mean, you should not be restricted from growing it in your backyard if you want to, any different than if you wanted to buy tomatoes in the grocery store versus buying them from, you know, or growing them in your own backyard. Not that you'd ever supply all your tomatoes for your life by growing them in the backyard. The tomato industry isn't threatened by you growing a few tomatoes in your backyard. You're still going to buy a lot of their tomatoes in one way or another, whether it's in a can of picked pasta sauce or a ketchup bottle or something, but they're going to sell a shit ton of tomatoes, and they shouldn't be threatened by the little mom and pop growing a few tomatoes in their backyard. And similarly, there's a commercial cannabis business that's thriving, and anybody who wants to be a private grower, it's not going to take away from their business any significant amount. So I think that local organizations should set up the rules for their communities, and they should also be people who have experience and not just, hey, Billy Joe and Anna, they're both, you know, on the commission. They always have been. You know, they were brought in by some previous administration, and that's their department, and they've always run it. And now we're going to try to legalize marijuana with these people who have never done anything to do with marijuana. They would be well advised to seek out experts in the field and say, hey, can you be someone who would be able to advise us as we try to craft this organization to be able to run this new industry that we know nothing about. And certain things are basic and certain things are very particular to that industry. And only someone who's an insider is going to be able to well advise them how to do that. For example,
let me ask you a question. You're all over the world. Not to interrupt you there, but do we see this happening? Like, I know in Vermont, Mass, you know, all of us are pulling our hair out to have them bring somebody knowledgeable from the industry and for consultations and stuff, because we don't see it out here, right? You know, it seems like we're putting these people, like you just said, people have no idea about cannabis, and they're running the company, they're running the
well, not so much the company. Don't misunderstand me. What I mean is the making of the rules for the government having said, okay, now it's legal, and here are the schedules of how we expect those businesses to run and interact with one another and the state and the taxes and everything else, and tracking of materials like you're growing a product that, you know, they want to know, is there any part of this plant that you're sort of sneaking out the back door and selling it without telling us about it? You know, those kinds of things are normal in any business. You know, they're looking for you not to cheat. But things that don't make sense are, for example, and I use this example because it was right in front of my face when I first came into this, but I came into Colorado and they were saying how, well, if your seeds aren't already in metric, you know, they won't allow any new seeds to come in. Now think about that for a second. You get too bogged down in the idea that, oh, okay, well, shoot, what am I going to do because I can't bring in seeds, and and you start dealing with this imaginary box that somebody else who doesn't know what the fuck they're doing has created, right? And it's like, let me ask the bigger question. What would be the harm in any new seeds coming into the state in the future? And conversely, what would be the harm in preventing any new seeds coming into Colorado in the future? Both of those things tell you immediately, it's like, why would I want to cap all genetics and never be able to improve what we've got here? Number one. And secondly, what if somebody in another state discovers some cancer cure that we could have, but we've drawn this box around and said there's no new genetics could be brought in? Do you understand? These are the kinds of things that it's like, well, why are you even making that rule in the first place? You wouldn't have to even police it if it didn't exist, right? But that's just a microcosm of the kinds of problems that are created every time some, you know, central planning body tries to create a legalization system for marijuana. They just don't know what the hell they're doing, and they're not tapping into, which would be the most obvious thing if you're anybody that's in business and you say, hey, if I don't know that much about something, you know what I do? I get these experts to come in and advise on it. So why aren't they doing the obvious? Get somebody, you know, who is either old school, you know, that has a reputation, has some results that they can point to and say, yeah, guy knows what he's doing, right? And you bring him in and you say, how would we do this? And you've kind of been around the full circle of the cycle of life with cannabis, and you know that it starts out as a seed, and then from there you have a plant, which then you can asexually propagate, and you can take cuttings from it, and you can replicate the same plant over and over. And these are all the ways that people normally grow marijuana, right? You could have people coming into that room who are tasked to create the rules for the growing of marijuana who don't even realize that those two different ways of propagating cannabis are very common with us, you know, and that seeds and females are preferred over males, all of those kinds of things. It's like they're starting from scratch and having to learn so much. And then they end up botching it, of course, because they didn't have enough information and enough experience with how things normally go through a cycle to be able to plan it properly for the other people who are then going to try to live by these rules that were made up by people that didn't know why they were creating the rules anyway.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting ones that you say rules is like, I'm going to use Vermont for an example, right? Thomas can probably back me up on this with you know, what we're allowed to grow, right? As a patient in Vermont, you know, we're allowed to have 8 in veg and 4 in flower, which makes no sense, correct? And then we're allowed to keep what we can produce off our flower, but we can't go outside more than an ounce. But it doesn't give you it's like it's all gray area, and then if you're a rec, you have half of that allowed to you. So you mean to tell me if I have 4 plants, I got to throw 2 away to grow 2? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the problem with the legalization, and just like Rick had mentioned, you know, the people that are making up these laws, they don't know what they're doing. They don't have any knowledge about growing cannabis. They don't know that a beginner grower isn't going to be able to produce a pound per plant to be able to suffice themselves for the year. That beginner grower that is growing their first plant, if they even make it through a successful grow, unless they've had some help or some good hardcore research that they've been doing, they aren't going to amount to much at all in their first grow or their first few. So all of these people that are limited to growing 2 or 4 flowering plants, or limited to a total plant of 10 count or 6 or whatever the case may be, regardless on the state, it's ridiculous. If anything, it should be set, if there's a limit at all, which I can understand the reason for there being a limit. You know, they don't want cannabis to be overrun throughout the states. They still want to be able to make their money and their taxes and everything else. So in my opinion, if they were to do anything at all, it should be more of a square footage limit. And I think anybody that actually knew about cannabis and actually had proper knowledge in it going into that would already be thinking about a square footage limit over a plant count limit specifically for that reason.
I mean, we really only get that here in Vermont. A lot of places get square foot licenses. Vermont, we get a plant for some reason, plant counts. But I mean, you know, if you're good at growing 4 plants, you can take those 4 plants and grow them into something huge, or you can grow them into something small. Okay, so here's my problem on what we just discussed, right? We're talking about growing at home for medical patients, right? How much does it cost to get a grow set up, and how much does it cost to sustain this grow for a medical patient who's probably not working because they have a medical ailment, who's probably stuck on some sort of section or gets some sort of compensation from some sort of department to help them through with their life, right? Whether it's Social Security or unemployment or whatever. And Thomas is on the show because what we know about Thomas is he can go to any situation and try to help that patient. The first time we talked to Thomas, the thing that blew me away is he had a patient growing from a skylight. And then during our conversation, we had a lot of people blow up on him for that not being correct. But at the end of the day, we have to live within our means, right? Like that patient might not be able to go out and buy a $600 light. They might not be able to go buy a hydroponic system. They might not be able to go purchase the nutrients needed. And then again, we're talking about a medical patient. Can these people get up and sustain, like, for veterans, PTSD, things like that? I think having a garden in every veteran home is a great idea. Have these guys go out and plant a garden, whether it's cannabis, herbs, rosemary, ginger. Like as a chef, I mean, I've been a chef a long time. I've worked 4 stars, 5 stars, culinary trained. So for me, I look at things like, we talk about our endocannabinoid systems, which a lot of our medical field has no idea how to even spell it, say it, or write it, let alone anything about it, right? And that's the fault of our government, right? And we were talking earlier, Rick, that a lot of people don't understand how this plant became illegal, right? It wasn't like it was always illegal. It wasn't like it killed a bunch of people. It wasn't like the FDA said, oh man, this is worse than drinking gasoline. We can't allow it, right? It was literally a political sham. And it started off with the Mexicans, the Hearst Paper Company, and the hemp thrashing machine. And then, we look at the presidents that were in charge in these certain instances, where we have Eisenhower, and then, then we get to the Reagan era, and then they became, as we're funding drugs, we're fighting drugs. It was just a crazy world we live in. But when you really look into it, I think you really lose faith in our government because, as you said, I mean, how did we get this plant illegal, Rick?
Yeah, it was discrimination and slander. The Jack Herer book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, is the obvious source for somebody to want to walk through the whole history of it. He did a great job of that. So look no further. There's the book to understand what happened there. But, again, we were saying earlier, I was trying to point out how logic will eventually prevail. And when this many untruths are being told about, a plant or anything, eventually the truth will come out. So that's where we are right now. But
how do you
legalization issues aside, it's legal. Yeah, right. People, they may not know how to make it, organized. How to organize the legalization is not really well understood. And it seems to me like maybe I would stumble myself. Am I, clairvoyant as to what's the right solution? What should everybody do for legalization? For me, it seems simple. Like, why not just treat it like tomatoes or anything else? Just let people grow what they want. Don't be afraid that they could grow too much. The gentleman, Thomas, was just saying how, square footage seems reasonable instead of plant number. And that's right. That's just been one of these obvious mistakes that they don't understand how this works. And so they're saying, well, we're thinking, I could have this many plants and I need like this many flowers or something stupid. There's a way they're thinking instead of, well, let me check into how this works. Oh, okay, so you can get so many grams per square foot, if you're a really good grower. Well, then we just have to restrict them to this many square feet. Done. Hello. The math does itself.
I mean, you've been in this a long time, and you've been in this industry a long time. Can craft cannabis survive commercial cannabis?
if anything, it's the space I want to be in. That's what Brothers Grimm is all about. I mean, we're a boutique breeding operation, always have been, and we're not about, making 18,000 different strains, and I'm really exaggerating, but even, 100 strains from one company. There are those out there that do that sort of thing. Why would I do it? It's more for me about having a really good thing. And if there's more than one really good thing, there has to be a good reason for having them both. They can't be too much alike,
Definitely.
And so my menu is pretty much set up that way. My breeding program is set up that way. I want to always take a plant that if I'm creating a seed line, then it better be an improvement on the parents that it came from, or else what's the point? Just grow one of the parents instead, right?
Right.
So that's kind of a principle by which I live, and I do my business that way. It has to be improving. It has to be benefit, in the next generation. I don't know how I got on that tangent, but the smoking will do that.
Well, I got a question for you. Before we turn over to Thomas for some grow tips this week, everybody talks about this. Feminized, non-feminized,
Oh, yeah.
flowers, all these different ways you can buy seeds, and why, and what's better, and what's the reasoning? Are we feminizing with colloidal silver? How,
Yeah.
Let us know what they should be looking for, and why.
I have been doing a seminar for the past 2 years in association with Canicon, and as I travel around to their various events, I've been speaking for about an hour each time on feminized seeds, and so there's a YouTube video of it if you search for Mr. Soul feminized seeds, and it's I forget if you go to my website, it's in there too, but my YouTube. Anyway, the thing with feminized seeds is people have to understand, if I can encapsulate a whole hour into like 1 minute right now, I'll try to hit all the most important points, right? So when you are creating feminized seeds, I don't even like the word feminized because it kind of implies that there was a pile of seeds sitting there that were regular at one time, and I've somehow changed them into feminized, right? The English language is that strict. It requires that be a past tense word, right?
Wow.
Feminized.
Yeah.
I did this at some time, in the past. Rather than calling them female seeds, which is what I do, or fem seed. And the reason being, when a seed is first created by the union of a pollen grain and a female flower, the pollen has the option of carrying, just as our parents' sperm had, our father's sperm had, either X or Y chromosomes, right? Pollen's the same thing. Each grain of pollen contains either a Y or an X chromosome associated with all the rest of the DNA in the pollen. So when a female flower, which carries only X chromosomes, is visited by a pollen grain that has a Y chromosome, that seed will grow up to be a male, right? And then if a X pollen, the pollen grain that has an X chromosome in it, lands on the flower, that seed will become a female, okay? So if you want to think of feminizing seeds in the most accurate way, pretend there was a way of filtering out all the pollen that had Y chromosomes in it and only allowed the X chromosome pollen to come through the filter and land on the female flowers. What would happen?
Okay.
All the seeds would be females.
Right.
So essentially that's what we do when we make female seeds. What did people do wrong in the past that gave female seeds or feminized seeds a bad name? Well, they mistook the method by which you get a female to give you pollen in the first place to use to pollinate another female. And the reason we're using a female is because a female only has X chromosomes in its body. So in its makeup, it has no Y chromosome. So if you can make a female make male flowers and pollen, that pollen would have to have X chromosomes in it only, right? But if that pollen was produced by a plant that was stressed, into the male flower, that is the very definition of a hermaphrodite, right? So the important thing is you can't get the pollen from the female through stress. And in fact, you have to test that this female that you intend to use won't do that, even if you stress it in any way possible. So there's your dilemma. Well, how am I going to get it to make pollen if it doesn't do it through stress? Well, the way you do it is that you have to recognize that what was really happening is this: the stress was causing a hormonal reaction in the plant, and the hormones are what caused it to make male flowers. So if you could find a plant that doesn't react to the stress, it's not a hermaphrodite, but you can still hormonally induce it to make pollen by using the silver thiosulfate or colloidal silver spray. Because what that does is it inhibits the female hormone and allows the flower to then take the shape of a male flower rather than a female flower. It doesn't have the right hormones to make it. So that's where the real knowledge of how fem seeds are created sets it into, now this is actually something that you could rely on, that it's going to work and you're going to only get female plants and there aren't going to be any hermaphrodites because the parents were already tested to be not hermaphrodite. And then one of the two parents was induced to make male flowers hormonally, not by stressing it. And then those seeds will be 100% female plants. No males, no hermaphrodites. And that's how you do it. So there it is, a whole hour and 2 minutes. If you're astute enough to follow all the connections, and it shouldn't be that hard.
No.
Well, my question is, I mean, this is where we're going to go with this, because we're seeing a lot of these feminized seeds get sold to the market, and people are, 1 in 12 male, you know what I mean? And their seeds, and they kind of throw them outside and forget about them because they're like, oh, they're feminized, you know what I mean? Is this where people are really skipping a step just to try to work the industry over? Because they're not taking their plants, putting them in the stress, they're not growing them out, they're not...
Well, if you don't test the breeding pair to know that they don't have a hermaphroditic tendency, right, then you won't know if you're breeding with Hermes or not, right? And very few people understand the science well enough to be able to go through what I just went through with you and explain how to properly make feminized seeds. So the fact that that's not that easy to grasp for the average person, just by doing the statistical analysis, you have to figure that 90-something% of all the people making feminized seeds probably don't know what they're doing, right? So is it a great mystery that there's bad fem seeds out there? Not to me, but there is a way to do it right, and I know how to do that, and I sell a lot of tens of thousands of seeds to commercial growers who want nothing but females, and that's all they get. A huge field, the whole building's full of female plants. Very uniform female plants. There's another, myth about fem seeds, that once a plant grew from a fem seed, that it's somehow different from a female that grew from regular seeds. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Some people think that, if it was a plant that grew from a fem seed, I can't breed with it, or it won't clone, or, there's some things about it that are different. But there's no reason why that would be. Because, like I said, what's different about this plant? It grew from a seed where the pollen grain had an X chromosome in it, and it's a female. That's the only thing that defines the female. It's not like fem seed females are different than regular seed females.
Right.
But there are many who believe that there's a difference.
Sure.
Yes, I mean, obviously you're very knowledgeable in this situation, but we've seen a lot of people buying seeds, and they get differences in, one guy will buy 5 seeds and all 5 seeds will pop, one guy will buy 5 seeds, 1 seed will pop, and the next thing you know, 3 of them are males. And
are you talking about regular seed or fem seed?
Just fem seeds. We get a question all the time about it because, hey, we bought
think about this.
And
Think about this. If you ever have somebody saying, hey, I bought fem seeds, but I got a male, there's only 2 explanations. One is that it's not really a male, it's a Hermes. You just think it's a male if it has so many male flowers on it or something. Okay, that's one possibility. The other one is that if it's an actual male, then the pollen grain that landed on the flower that created that seed had a Y chromosome in it, and it had to have come from a male cannabis plant. And therefore, the breeder was sloppy enough to be breeding regular seeds and fem seeds in the same building, right?
A lot of people
Yeah.
don't
Somehow
realize-
a white pollen got into that room. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any males.
Well, yeah, that makes a lot of
Or you
sense.
walk from room to room without properly cleaning.
Yes.
Or
Sure.
And how easy is that to do, right?
Easy.
So, like I said, there's like probably over 90-something% of all breeders don't really understand how to do fem seeds correctly, and most grow houses are somewhat dirty, and the control of pollen from one room to another is dubious at best.
Yes.
Yep.
That is
I
correct.
mean, the other thing we talk about too, and we've heard of these issues before, where somebody will go see someone else's grow and help them out with it, go home, and then they bring mites back to them, or
That's always the risk when you bring people in your grow.
yeah. So we highly recommend you don't show, don't share.
Yeah. That's the old school way of doing things. Is you live like a hermit. You just didn't even let anybody in, and that's like need to know only.
Right.
Family and friends, that's it, even
Because,
friends.
well, I think now it's like it's our exciting time. So hey, we're allowed to grow plants. We're all like, look what we're doing. Come pet it. Come look at it. Look. And we want to show it to the product.
Especially nowadays, it's a different generation. The kids today, they're very much used to sharing and social media, and nobody keeps anything like secret. It's all.
And like you said, it's a different world now. So a lot of these guys who've been in the industry for a long time, they're used to hiding. You know what I mean? They don't want, if you.
They're most comfortable with that.
Oh, right. You risk the chance of getting a bust, right? You
It's
risk
a
the chance
difficult one.
plant issues. You risk so many chances. It's not worth it. And still to this day, even when legalization happened in Vermont, we saw a lot of these guys that are some of the best growers that still haven't come out of the shadows yet because they still don't trust the government. They serve time. They have felonies. These are the guys that really should be heading up some of these grow operations and being used as educators and people to talk to and come in and set a level up of something because how many failures multi-million-dollar failures have we seen with these huge companies starting these 100,000 square foot grows and hire a guy that just came out of college and has never really grown because growing tomatoes.
Yeah. Meanwhile, all the prisons should be emptied of all cannabis convictions, and jobs should be made available preferentially to guys who were busted for growing in the past and things like that. So if it were a fair world, that would be the way I would advocate for it to be. Let's make sure that before we get some new rush of people who never had anything to do with cannabis making billions, let's take care of our own and make sure that these guys have jobs and that, pull them out of prisons and, right the wrongs that society has done to them before we go rewarding some rush of.
We're sending these people to prison, right? We have all these prisoners, and we don't have a government that can seem to grow any weed. So why are we not growing weed in prison? Why can't this be a course that these guys are taking so when they go through prison, they can get a license or a certificate of some sort, even as a felon, that shows that they've been through the courses, they've been reprimanded, they've served their time.
Look at me. All you need is the prison. You don't need the courses. The way it works in a prison is that if you were ever able to have a job where, you're the guy that works in the garden and you're the cannabis grower, or there's a group of you all, right? Those guys would immediately start their own business very generically, very organically, and it would just build itself. And these guys would cultivate new guys that came into prison as they're being let out, and so on and so forth. Don't worry, the school doesn't need to be organized. This is the kind of thing that would just form itself.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's our model that we really need for the whole country. It's like, hey, carte blanche, whatever the fuck you want to do. I'm doing my thing, you do your thing. I don't really feel like we're competing with one another because it's all like we're rock bands or something. And I play my music and my fans like it. You play your music, your fans like it. Some of our fans like both of us. Some don't. What do we give a fuck? We're making music, right?
Exactly.
To me, why not just let it laissez-faire?
That's why I say when we see a lot of this competition out there right now, like, out east here in the last couple of years, we had legalization happen, everybody joined forces, we're all buddies, we're all pushing for that common goal, and now all of a sudden it seems like the honeymoon's over, And oh, you think you're doing this, and we're doing.
But let me ask you a question. I hate to cut you off, but I don't want to lose the train of thought. When those guys are saying, "Hey, you're doing what I'm doing, and I don't like it," why? Is it have they seen some slowdown in their sales because of the competition of the other guy? I really doubt that. It's more of just a pissing match between Family Feud or whatever. Like, hey man, you're copying off what we're doing. The bigger question is it hurting you, or even possibly helping you, that the guy across the street is running the same gear as you?
No.
And the market is like buying up everything that both of you can possibly produce every month. Until there becomes a problem where this other guy's making so much of the same thing that we do that it's impinging on our business, I don't think there should be an argument, right? No. You're just feeding into a market that's big enough to absorb both of you until that problem starts to occur.
Yep.
So why argue about it until while there's no problem?
Exactly.
I'm a restaurant. No, I'm a restaurant guy, so I kind of do the same thought process as you. Like when we saw legalization happen, there was a huge boom. These companies blew up. But then again, it's like a brand new restaurant. You open up a brand new restaurant, everybody goes, right? And then a month later, the new restaurant, everybody goes there because they want to check it out. So obviously your sales drop. But as a smart business person, we should realize this and be set up for this in any business that we do, whether it's a laundromat or a restaurant or the gas station down the street. When the new gas station rolls in town, it's competition, but you also should be inspired by it to make a change, right? To look at what they're doing, look what you're doing, and see where you can fill the voids in the industry that you're working within. We didn't. Let me
offer this from the days that I spent in sales psychology classes and so on. The only time when you really have a problem with competition is when you're not unique in your service or your product. When you become a commodity like paper or automobiles, who the fuck cares about who you are? They don't need to buy from you. They can get the same thing somewhere else cheaper, okay? So the way that you prevent people from competing with you is you create a uniqueness in your service or your product where how does anybody compete with me? They don't do the same thing as me, like the band, right? They don't do our music. Am I making that clear? I don't know. I don't like seeing people get into these kinds of pissing matches, and it's sometimes, most of the time, so unnecessary.
Absolutely.
I totally agree. That's why we brought the situation, because we see it and we laugh at it. We're going, guys, how many millions of people are in your state at this point, and you two are pissing over a candy bar? You know what I mean? Is it this?
They're not going to sell it. Yeah. They're not going to get stuck with the candy bar. People are buying.
Yeah,
right.
I talked to people in this industry over the course of the quarantine, and they're saying, like, anybody who has an online presence, sales are double or triple right now.
Yep.
So everyone's staying home, buying online, and it hasn't hurt the cannabis industry, I don't think, because we were deemed essential. We were allowed to go to work and all that sort of thing. So all of our facilities and growing operations and so on haven't had to stop running. And the demand has, if anything, been greater because more people are home and able to say, hey, you know what I'm going to do today is just smoke some weed, relax, watch a movie.
Well, because of this quarantine, though, we're seeing all sorts of new ideas and approaches being made, right? Like we're seeing states doing curbside pickups. We're seeing deliveries now, and Massachusetts is going to start delivering now. My question now is, it's the big talk is the world is never going to be the same as it was before COVID, right? We're all learning new tricks and habits. We're all working from home. We're all Zooming live on computers now. We're all really focused in on this internet and accessibility thing because it's something new to us, right? A lot of us people haven't been able to sit down in front of a computer due to family, jobs.
Totally. I think the COVID-19 virus hibernation has irreversibly changed many things about our culture and the way we perceive our freedoms and the world around us. And it wouldn't even take anything as severe as this. This thing has been pretty severe. This is a really big deal, right? I mean, it wasn't like the guy who, the shoe bomber, what do they call him? He was on a plane and he tried to blow up the plane with a bomb that was in his sneakers, right?
Yeah.
And
And that little thing changed the whole industry of us going to TSA and having to take our shoes when we go off the machine and stuff. So some very little things can have a permanent effect on our culture and the times we're living in and so on. This has been really big. I predict that, the effects from this are going to be much greater than you even imagine right now. And I use the stock market as an example. When we first saw the stock market tumble so badly at the beginning of this, it didn't seem like anything was really out of order around us, right? I mean, everything still seemed to be going on pretty normally. So what the stock market is a prognosticator, almost foolproof prognosticator of what's going to happen next in the world. And it's
You
so
should probably
accurate
talk to Thomas since you haven't the whole show.
over the weeks that followed from the first couple of days of the stock market tumbling, I realized, like, the stock market's predicting that something really bad is happening. And I haven't seen it yet, but all it took was patience, and day in and week out, we saw it unfolding, and how damned if I can't go to the grocery store, damned if I can't go and have a beer. I can't have a meal in a restaurant anymore. Everything's drive-through. My friends are home. They're not working. You just couldn't believe how bad it just kept getting worse and worse, right? But the fucking stock market knew it on the first day. How? Because it's this collective consciousness of all the buyers and sellers of the entire planet plugged into this one organism, right? So, of course, it's perfect in its ability to respond. It's plugged into everything, right? So I learned that through this COVID virus, I will always watch the stock market, and pay close attention, because I was impressed by how perfect in prediction that it called this thing. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that if that's true, let's watch for it to start to show us that things are improving. How's the stock market look today?
Oh, let's see. Well, we're about 3,000 points down.
What's kind of funny about the COVID?
Is it coming up slow or fast?
Not
right?
good.
I mean, but the thing was, is before COVID even became an issue, there was already talk of that about to happen naturally within our own Wall Street market, right? It was going to come down. They were predicting some issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you can't say all the closings. The closing of all these businesses and so on is way beyond whatever you thought might happen in terms of slowdown in the economy.
I never thought I would be able to see a bar be able to sell alcohol, pick up and drive away. You know what I mean? They're doing curbside deliveries with alcohol.
What's that? Wild wings, wild buffalo wings. We sat outside, girlfriend and myself, and we're ordering wings, and they're bringing out a 6-pack of beer and everything too. And you can sit in the truck, and it's like, okay, here's where we're eating out,
Yeah, that's American, right?
thank God I've always liked Wendy's, as a place to get some fast food, because it's all I can do. You have to drive through to get food now.
Right.
It's got to be the thing I miss the worst, is not being able to go to a bar or restaurant, eat.
Yeah, just relax and unwind with friends in a situation that's not your kitchen or your living room. I mean, when this is all over, the bar business is going to be unreal. Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to go out. I mean, I'm a DJ, Brandon's a DJ. We have residency or stuff like that. So for us, we've been pulling our hair out because we're DJs, man. Our getaway is like people go to the bar. Our getaway is to go get on the decks and play for the people at the bar,
All right, and I've been going to these seminars where, we're at Cannacons and these things where it's all people coming together, right, or a cannabis cup or something. So I know you're in an industry where you're looking for masses of people to want to congregate together and listen to your music and so on.
Right.
And those businesses in particular, you got to be feeling it.
Definitely.
Luckily for me, going to seminars in cannabis cups temporarily being suspended hasn't hurt business, because, like we were saying, you can go online, you can go to brothersgrimmseeds.com and order seeds direct from us, and people at home growing and buying seeds. And this is the season. It's the spring. The rest of May and even a little bit of June will still probably be pretty busy in the seed business, but it was a really good spring, and
you have an established business that, like, this time of year, everybody wants. I mean, I think we've seen, and maybe Thomas, we're going to get Thomas on here to talk a little bit.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate about that. Believe me.
Right, but are we seeing more people this year actually putting the time into it? Because, like, I mean, at least for me, I'm getting asked all the time by people who've never grown before. Hey, I'm going to throw some in my garden. Am I legally allowed to do that? What are
Absolutely.
Like, people are more focused on the food, which is great for me because as a food guy, I believe we should have gardens. We should have our own herb gardens because, again, we get back to essential herbs that are good for you: rosemary, ginger. All these echinaceas and teas that are actually will provide health for you as much as cannabis will. We all should be growing this stuff. We should be growing your own plants. Experiment with it. It's not a huge financial loss if you just throw some beans outside and watch them. I mean, if you're going to invest into a tent and a room and a grower like that, make sure you have all your ducks in a row and your education right. That way you're not wasting your money. But everybody this year should go throw a seed in the ground. Thomas, let's get to you really quick because I don't want to skip out on you. We have Thomas Markholm from Vermont Grow Coaching, a great friend of ours. Tom, what have you seen? I mean, you're out there, you're dealing with the farms. You deal very closely with Grow Vermont, one of our favorite stores down in Rutland, Vermont here. And you guys do classes and courses and education all the time. What do you feel this spring is bringing out for new growers? Is there a big bump in interest, or is it just people still afraid?
Well, there's definitely a big bump in interest, but I think that's because of a lot of different reasons. The first reason being, it's now been a couple of years now since legalization happened in Vermont. So as you'd expect, the stigma slowly lowers as you go on through the year. So more people are going to be interested this year in growing than they have been in previous years, specifically for that reason. But then throw into the fact that you have COVID-19 keeping everybody at home. Everybody's thinking about, what are we going to do this year? Oh, what am I going to do right now? I've got nothing to do. Oh, I'm going to plant some vegetables. Oh, well, I've got the ability to plant some cannabis. I might as well do that too. Oh, well, now I don't know what I'm doing, and I've given spider mites to all of my plants, including my vegetables. Grow coach, come help me. That's really been the majority of the calls over the last few weeks is, how do I start my seeds? Or I started my seeds, and now they look horrible. Come help.
Right.
But for the most part, it's a great time to be starting seeds. I know, unfortunately, Vermont has a really short growing season, and we still had another 32, 33 degree night last night, and tonight doesn't look very warm either. But when it comes down to it, now's a great time to be starting seeds, and if you're stuck at home with COVID or whatever the case may be, why not? I mean, you got nothing better to do, right?
I think it's the time that people are really looking into how to grow beans. Like, people are Googling this stuff. Like, I get questions all the time. Hey, can I grow this next to that? How hard is it to grow cannabis outdoors? We talk a lot, Thomas, on our show because we're in New England, right? So the choice of strain is immensely important if you're growing outside, right? Because you don't want a plant that has a long flowering stage, or what we'll call days to finish, right? We've seen plants that can go 55 days or even quicker. Then we've seen plants that go 80
Still
days.
around
But
that
if you're doing
99.
an 80-day plant in Vermont, you're going to have problems. It might not be finished. So, to call somebody that knows is a great idea before you start. Now, Thomas, we have our weekly growers tip this week, right? What do you have for us this week? I mean, we've been talking about a lot about getting our plants outside, getting them in the ground, when, how. What do you got for us this week, Tom?
So today I wanted to talk a little bit about transitioning your plants outside or to your greenhouse. So for the most part, when you start plants indoors, there isn't a grow light imaginable, at least not one that I've been able to find, that has the power of the sun. With that said, if you put a seedling in a small grow tent or in your room and start with a couple of T5s or a couple of small LED lights, and then try to move it directly out into the sun in the middle of a nice warm day in the middle of May, it's not going to work. You're going to end up burning your plants. You're going to end up stressing them. Even if they make it through, they're not going to be happy about making it through. They may bounce back, but in reality, the best way to transplant your plants from indoors to outside is to give them a transitional period. One of the ways I like to give them a transitional period is to move them outside first thing in the morning and give them a couple of hours of natural sunlight first thing in the day, or late in the evening, say around 5, 6 o'clock after the sun has started to set. Give them a couple of hours. A lot of people like to leave them out throughout the day and just give them put them in a shaded area to begin with. I prefer to give them a couple of hours first thing in the morning or late in the evening, bring them back in and give them back the artificial light till the following day, give them a little bit more, so on and so forth. And at the same time, can also work out my stress techniques to determine whether or not a plant is going to hermaphrodite on me at any point. I'll do the paper bag test where I'm throwing the bag over, putting the plant in darkness for 48 to 72 hours, forcing it back into the flowering phase and then right back into vegetative by giving it 24 hours light again. Doing a lot of low stress pinching, topping, training in that sense, just trying to see what I can do to intentionally force the plant to hermaphrodite before actually sending it outside in the spring. And that will ensure that any of the plants that I'm actually putting out this week or next week and starting to transition to the outdoor climate are not going to turn hermy or cause any sort of issues to my own crop or anyone else around me later on at the end of the season. That's the biggest one for me is I'm not as much worried about whether or not I get seeds in my own crop. If I get seeds in my own crop, I made a mistake, that's on me. But if I get seeds in my neighbor's crop, that should be a felony.
Yeah, right. And we've seen that. We've heard of issues with pollination crossing over between rows. We've seen issues with nutrient leaks and things getting in other people's soils where they're trying to grow organic and then they've got a guy next to them not growing organic. You know, there's a lot of those runoff issues that we discuss as well.
Not to mention the hemp farms letting the males run rampant.
Yeah. And let me ask a quick question, if I can jump in and ask Thomas, because that was great, the definition that you gave and the advice you gave about how to harden the plants off to the brightness of the sun and transition them, and that was great. The one thing I missed was around what size plant are you putting, when you put them outside, typically how big are they or at what age from sprouting them?
Okay, yeah, not a problem. So if we're still having the cooler temperatures like we are right now, I'll only be bringing a plant outside for the most part if it has at least 3 or 4 sets of leaves. But with that said, I think if you're a Vermonter or anyone that has a low plant count limit, it's best to start your plants as early as possible. My 2 flowering plants have been vegetating since December because the bigger they are when they go outside, the bigger they'll be when they finish. You can actually move seedlings directly outside after they've been transplanted or right after they've started indoors as well, if you really want to. But in my opinion, that kind of defeats the purpose of starting plants indoors and transitioning them outside. If you're going to be starting them indoors and then transitioning outside at the set of first new leaves, you might as well just be starting them outside in the greenhouse to begin with.
Right. No, I always advocate if you're going to ensure that the plant's going to do well outdoors, the longer you can wait, putting it out at 2 feet tall is better than, 6-inch seedling. They tend to no way you're going to kill this plant. It's established and you dig it a hole and you put it in the ground. Many people can't plan ahead long enough that they're buying their seeds and germinating and growing indoors for 4 months like you did. But that's a great plan. I loved when I heard you saying that. I'm like, this guy is smart because he's been letting the plant veg for all those months indoors waiting for spring to come. And when he puts it outside by the end of the season, this thing's going to be monsters. And that's the way to maximize outdoor growing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to do we have to do light deprivation in a greenhouse, or we have to start them inside. Otherwise, it just isn't going to work in our climate here.
Yeah, no, you got to have a sturdy, hardy plant put outside if you're in New England. So you guys great. Hey, I should probably be running along shortly. How long do you want me to stick around? I don't want to rudely jump out of the show.
Well, we're going to wrap it up here in the next few minutes. We're going to let Thomas.
Okay, cool.
We'll let you. I got one question for you, Rick, and I'm going to pull this out on you, and maybe I'll do it now while we're sitting here. Typically, we do a strain of the week every week with Brandon. We'd love to hear you give us your rendition of the strain of the week with the Cinderella 99. Typically, what we do is we just discuss growth patterns, the health benefits of it, what people should be looking for and their special needs. But let's promise and we'll get this wrapped up in the next 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. So Cinderella 99 was created back in 1999, and it took about 2 years of development to release it in 1999. But the idea was that I had a very special female that had qualities that I thought really were like the ideal indoor plant. Okay. And the potency and the flavor also were excellent. So it was like, I wished that I could share this with everybody without having to send them a clone, I wished that I could have seeds that would reproduce this plant, right? So knowing that your mother and father, well, let me not get into the breeding process too deeply, but just know that it was several back crossings, several generational back crossings to that same female clone that produced the seeds eventually that were Cinderella 99. And you can look up the Cinderella story on our website, brothersgrimmseeds.com. And the result, though, was that we got very uniform plants from this seed line that people could rely on to be, and here's where I'll come to the qualities that I thought were so great about this plant that I wanted to see replicated in seed form. In those days, we wanted sativa results. In other words, great bud, flavor, and high. The indica stuff is kind of sleepy and what have you, but and it wasn't even that available to guys like we grew up in New England, New York, Massachusetts, all those areas, and we only got sativas in general for whatever reason, and so we loved the weed itself, but waiting those long flowering periods and dealing with the lanky plants and so on, it just wasn't conducive to indoor growing under HID lights and so on. But this plant that I had gotten from a seed that came out of a bud that I broke open in a coffee shop in Amsterdam the year before turned out to grow into this compact, sort of giving you the quality of the sativa high and the flavors and so on, but growing with a flowering period and staying more compact indoors and not hurrying. And these qualities were all the things that I would hope for, and it just kind of took off on its own at that point. The name was my imagination, marijuana, the buds come from a female plant, so a woman name or a female name, Cinderella, Ella being like the suffix, a feminine suffix, right? And cinders are what? Ashes, right? When you burn a joint, what does it turn into, right? So Cinderella, female, all these things tied together. And plus the humble beginnings, it came from a bag seed, essentially, that, we worked over a couple of years breeding program to develop a seed line that was in its original release shortly thereafter. Those who grew it called it the holy grail of indoor marijuana. So we really took from very humble beginnings and created a seed line and a plant that has become a classic now. It's been 20 years since it was first created, and you can't count the number of hybrids of Cinderella 99 and something else that became something really special. Sure. Queen, and many others, the Apollo line, everything. People tend to find that if you cross anything to Cinderella 99, it helps it. The next generation, the offspring, are improved by. So that's why it's the #1 seller in our company and why people come back to it. And the flavor and the look, the bag appeal and everything is pretty amazing. I mean, this is a jar of it right here I was showing you guys earlier. Nice, big, frosty, all flower, very little leaf, super easy to trim, and so on and so forth. So that's Cinderella 99, and a little bit about the story of how it came to be. And come and check out our website and look at all the other strains. We just released a glue strain we call Grimm Glue, and I'm really extremely proud of it, I have to say. I can't say enough about how positive the reaction of everybody who's tried it, both growers and smokers.
We've seen pictures, man. The Cinderella 99, at least out here in New England, is one of the most revered, sought after strains. Everybody wants it. It's like,
it's elusive, isn't it? In a certain way.
Yeah, it is. It really is. But you've done well with that. You know what I mean? Like, we had our concerns when Phylos kind of did the Phylos Galaxy little thing there about where our genetics and then how that was all going to pan out. I mean, we haven't seen anything come out of that yet. It's kind of like nobody's really talking about it anymore.
I think it was all ado about nothing, I didn't send them material beyond, a couple of cuts, and I don't see how that's ever going to be a problem, that they were able to look at the DNA from a couple of cuttings of plants that I gave them. What of it, So this is the DNA profile of Cinderella 99. What am I going to do with that?
Yeah, right. You can make seeds. Who knows?
Exactly.
But all right. I mean, that's our story of the week, guys. Cinderella 99 doesn't get any better than the man himself, right?
Thank you, guys.
Love it. Rick, we're going to get you back on the show again, man. Because
I'm always happy. I like talking with you guys. So let's do it again.
Definitely. Thank you for coming on. Tom, we're going to let you finish up on your grower's guide real quick.
Nice to meet you, Tom.
Where can people reach out to you?
Thanks for coming on.
Where can people reach out to you, Rick? Where can they ask you questions? Do we just push everybody to the website? How do you prefer to be reached out to?
Here, I'd love to tell you a little bit about that because I have a whole new partnership that started in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is just blowing up in terms of demand for cannabis and people who want to both grow and start dispensaries and so on. The dispensaries are being served Brothers Grimm Seeds, and they can become retailers of our seeds in the dispensaries in Oklahoma. They just have to reach out to Stash House, which is a supplier, of dispensaries already. So I'm sure they don't have trouble finding Stash House, but through them they can become retailers of Brothers Grimm Seeds over the counter in their dispensary in Oklahoma. And I have a partner there who is part of the production and marketing of Brothers Grimm. And his name's Rocky Fisher, and he's in Bixby. So the locals there can look him up, go on our website, or that's probably the best way. And we'll direct you toward Rocky, or Rocky at brothersgrimmseeds.com will get to him. There you go. That's his email, just like Mr. Soul at brothersgrimmseeds.com is my email. And so please come and look at the website, folks. We are doing direct sales from the breeder to the customer, which is great reassurance, because one of the things about cannabis seeds is people always want to know, is this the real thing? And nobody mishandled it along the way. Am I sure that this really came from the breeder and all that? So we've solved that problem for y'all, and we're proud to be able to present our product direct to you. Commercial growers looking for large quantities of seeds, we'd love to do business with those folks, and an email to me is usually the best way to kick that off. And I'm actually delivering 30,000 seeds to a gentleman in Arizona next week. I'm going to hand deliver them, fly them down to him. So it's a very personal relationship that we develop with our clients, and I encourage anybody to write to us at my email address, Mr. Soul, brothersgrimmseeds.com. Or if you're in Oklahoma, sure look up Rocky Fisher. He's Rocky at brothersgrimmseeds.com, and come and see the website. I wish I could say we're going to be at a show near you or a cannabis cup near you, but for the moment we're in this lockdown. And
you're coming to Arizona next week, Rick?
When is it going to be Groundhog Day?
Did I hear you just say that you're coming to Arizona?
I'll be in Arizona next Tuesday, very briefly, like a 24-hour stay to deliver seeds and review the gentleman's growing facilities and so on.
Excellent. I live right in Phoenix. Let's get together and have lunch.
I'd love to sometime. The best breakfast I ever had was in Phoenix, Arizona one morning when I woke up in a hotel and they served me Southwestern Eggs Benedict.
Nice.
Now imagine an Eggs Benedict with all the normal, hollandaise and all that other stuff, right? But with like the hot peppers and the whole Southwestern and spicy breakfast thing, chipotle, flavors and all that. My mind was blown. From the Northeast, and I was like, wow, that is some kind of breakfast. So that's one of the main things I remember about Phoenix. Let's make some new memories there, right?
Definitely.
Definitely, guys should hook up. Rick, and man, I can't thank you enough. We've been following
My pleasure.
for years. We love watching you on Facebook. If you guys can find Brothers Grimm Seeds Facebook, Rick is very active. He's always posting. He's always
Oh yeah, Instagram. Don't forget Instagram. I mean, for cannabis in this culture, Instagram is huge. And we have Brothers Grimm Seeds as one Instagram feed, and then there's Mr. Soul _C99 where I share a lot of my personal life at the ranch, my animals, and so on. So tune in to either one or both. I'd love to have you.
Yeah, guys. Rick, thank you again. Keep up the work, man. We love the way you approach your business. We love the way you run your business.
Thank you.
And we love the pride that you take in doing what you do, which is the most refreshing thing that we can find within our industry. There's a lot of pride, there's a lot of quality there, and it really is some of the best seeds you're going to be able to find in the market, guys, like legitimately. Again, reach out to the Brothers Grimm Seeds guys. Tell me you said hi. We'll be replaying the show here and there throughout the week. We'll get back to Thomas to finish up his grow coaching tips, and I got a couple of questions for Thomas, including something he talked about was plant transfers. I know people that grow seeds in 30-gallon plants, and I know people that will not do that. They go from cup to 10 to 15 to 20. And why? Is there a benefit to that, Tom? Let me know, because that's what I want to know. Rick, thank you again. Brandon,
Appreciate it.
you rock. We're going to stay on for a few more minutes, let Thomas get it on, and then we're going to get off, and we'll see you guys next week. Next week, we have a great show for you guys as well. We're actually going to do a demo of glass beads, which I'm really excited about. If you guys know Kyle, that's all I got to say. Kyle, he's got some of the nicest beads out there. One of our good friends, Rick Naya, wears a set. So he's
Hey, Rick.
We're gonna get him on to do a demo. We can't wait. Rick, we'll talk to you later.
What's up, guys? Great talking to you. Thanks again. All the best.
You're welcome.
We'll touch base
Thank you.
soon. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Thomas. Now we're back. Sorry about all this, guys. It's I'm a little excited for the Mr. Soul. The guy's got so much information that it's hard to cut him off or not let him speak. Let's wrap this show up real quick. Thomas, transplanting. Getting our plants used to the light, which is something that a lot of people don't realize, because you can hernia your plant just by going from the indoor to the outdoor, correct?
Absolutely. When Rick had mentioned putting plants out 2 feet or taller, that's a really good idea as far as size is concerned. Mainly, if not because of the hardiness of the plant, because of the plant's maturity at that point. Unless you've taken a plant from clone, usually a seedling that's only a couple of inrows high isn't going to be able to be sexed at that point. So you're not going to be able to even determine whether or not it's going to hernia or not. So you want to wait till the plant's a little bit bigger at that point. But as far as the transition outside goes, as I mentioned before, I'll do usually about 2 hours, usually in the morning or in the evening for the first day or so, and then slowly increase the outdoor lighting for the plant over the next week to the point of where by the end of about 5 or 6 days, it's receiving direct sunlight throughout the entire day without an issue. I like to do a slow transfer like that mainly because I want to prevent overstressing the plant and ensure that it has the best ability to take off once it's been transitioned outside. Now, you had mentioned transplanting, and as far as going from a smaller pot, potting up, or starting in a larger pot. In that sense, I prefer to start in a smaller pot and pot up, because when you plant your seeds, the first thing your plant is going to do is send your roots out in search of water. Once your roots start growing out, your roots are going to continue to grow up. So as your plant starts to grow up, if you're planted in a larger pot to begin with, you're not going to have vegetative growth as quickly as you otherwise would in a smaller pot, because the smaller pot's going to fill up with your roots faster, allowing that vegetative growth to take off. Additionally, if you start in a larger pot, you end up running into the issues of potential overwatering. If you're using a living soil, I actually prefer to start in a larger pot, or to start with a seedling in a small cube and then directly into the larger pot, because living soil is more stable and a lot harder to overwater in that sense. There's more beneficial microorganisms and worms that help keep everything aerated and keep things going. But in the event that you're, say, just buying a bag of Fox Farms or buying a bag of whatever, or even mixing your own soil that isn't a nice, good living soil, and you're just putting it in a smart bag or putting it in a pot and starting in a 30-gallon pot or a 50-gallon pot and trying to water a seedling, chances are, unless you're really good at what you do, you're going to end up running into some overwatering issues. Allowing the plant or the pot itself to dry out between waterings also encourages root development, encourages the roots to search out for water. So in that sense, I usually will start with either a small 4x4 inch cup or a small seedling cube, and then from there either pot up to a 1-gallon pot or directly into my final medium, depending on my end goal. If I'm growing indoors, I'll pot up to a 1-gallon pot, and then from there, I usually directly into the living soil that's indoors. If I'm going outdoors, it'll usually go right from a small biodegradable pot directly outdoors into the ground.
I mean, and then you can get substantial growth tricks out of repotting, right? I mean, every time I've ever repotted, I've seen the plant react like, thank you. You know, it's like, they'll grow forward overnight, right?
Absolutely. So it's like Just like a turtle, for instance. You take a turtle or a fish, a goldfish, and put it in a small tank. Over the next year or so, it's not going to grow very big. But if you take that tank and decide, oh no, you can have a 50-gallon tank instead, that animal's going to blow up in that tank. They're going to get so much bigger. Works the same way for the plants. Once the plant's actually been established and is healthy and hardy, once you transplant it into a larger home, it will take off.
It's a good comparison, actually, when you think about it, because the fish will stunt its growth when it meets its capacity within its environment, right?
Absolutely, and the plant's going to do the same thing. So that's why you don't want to leave a plant in a small pot for too long, because you end up with root circling and root bound issues. If you end up with roots that are circling around the pot, at that point, eventually, you end up having roots suffocate other roots to the point of killing the plant and not being able to uptake nutrients and water.
Mm-hmm. No, and people don't realize that overwatering, and Tom, tell me if I'm wrong. If just in overwatering alone, you can create what looks like multiple different nutrient problems that you could be chasing around. So you have to get the watering down right first, right, in the pH.
Absolutely. If you have your plants overwatered right off the bat, especially in the seedling stage, you're going to see yellowing, you're going to see brown spots. It's going to look like you have calcium deficiency and nitrogen deficiency, and you're not going to know what's wrong with it. It could be curling and really, really droopy. It could be flopped over. But in reality, just maintaining a proper pH, as you mentioned, and maintaining a proper soil consistency is huge. For me, a proper soil consistency is field consistency. If you pick up a handful of soil and squeeze it really hard in your hand, I want to see 3, maybe 4 drops of water come out of that soil. To me, that's the perfect soil. It has the right amount of water in it for the plant to be able to continue growth, but at the same time isn't oversaturated to the point of causing root issues or underwater to the point of causing additional issues with droopiness and or stunted growth.
That's where people need to start first. Make sure your pH is correct. Make sure you're not overwatering. And like you said, if you get to the point where the roots can't dry out between waterings and we're creating more problems with root rot, mold issues, things of that nature, then we are really helping anything, right? And again, I hate seeing people throw nutrients and products and chemicals at their plants because they go, hey, I look like I have a nutrient deficiency. Where do I go? You know what I mean? Or and then also the other effect where people just read the bottle and it says, hey, add 3 tablespoons per gallon, and they're going, well, my plants are under nutrientized now, so they put 6 tablespoons in that gallon. Now they're burning their plants. You know what I mean? So we see people go back and forth and they chase their problems, but really at the beginning of it, people have to step back and just start over again. It's like just the basics. It always comes down to the basics. When you're in cooking or think about any of the things we have issues with that start to spiral out of control. You literally have to stop the spiral and start over. Go back to basics. Flush your water, start over, pH it, get the nutrients proper. But like you said, you got to be careful because of the shock values. And we were talking about hermaphrodite a lot today, which, Rick's conversation on, feminized seeds was amazing, right? Because, a lot of people are doing it Rick's way. And that's where my question is this where we see the failures, Anyways, we do have to wrap up the show. We went way overboard, but we're transferring plants outside. We talked about light. We talked about our seasons, right? We talked about one of the biggest questions I always get asked is transplant, right? When do you know? How do you know? Size. What do I do? Can I throw in a 50-gallon pot, a seed, or not? I mean, we know people do that, and it's not like the plant won't grow, but there's benefits to doing it these other ways. Like Rick was saying, there's all sorts of benefits to these little tricks that you do to get an outcome of a plant that you don't need to have a chemical to do, right? You don't need Miracle Grow to grow these beautiful big trees because you can manipulate it in this grow process in the ways of stress and brown bags and pinching and topping and training, right? So there's a lot of great things out there, guys. And again, if you have a question about your grow, reach out to one of us. Thomas is always there, a great source of information, as you know. Reach out to your local breeders that you guys know that are growing the best cannabis. See what they're doing. Just ask for help. It's a great industry to talk to. Thomas, do you have anything more on this week's segment?
Just a quick tip on spider mite control. So I've already had some hemp farms contact me this season and say, we've got spider mites in our greenhouse already. What do we do? One of the biggest things I can mention as far as spider mite control is preventative maintenance. If you can do something along the lines of companion plants, such as rosemary. Spider mites hate rosemary. If you can't use a companion plant, rosemary, around your cannabis plants, use a little bit of rosemary oil. Use about a tablespoon per gallon of water, and mist your plants about once a week during the vegetative phase to help deter the spider mites. Rosemary oil is one of the oils that I choose when I use it as a natural insecticide, mainly because rosemary does not kill ladybugs and does not kill predatory mites. So it may deter them from wanting to be on or around the plants, but you don't end up with any sort of issues as far as killing your ladybugs if you lose 10,000 ladybugs into your grow in order to help control issues, or if you have nematodes or beneficial mites or anything like that in your soil or on your leaves to help control. But other than that, I think that's the best I can do for you today, Joe. We're getting short on time.
Right. We already lost Rick. Did Tim Anthony Fair join us from Vermont Cannabis Solutions? Tim, how are we doing today?
Hey, how's it going, Joe?
Good, man. Good. I imagine you had a crazy day. We're glad you got
You can say that. I'm juggling a couple things around, so couldn't miss last minute or two, though. I had to jump in and say hi, everybody.
Well, glad you missed a great show. There's a lot of things going on that, and Rick was great because he brought one of the biggest things that we talk about a lot is the legality of what a seed is, right? Because there's no THC, you have to grow it out, shipping, where the industry is at right now, especially with COVID, right? Because we talk about it a lot with seeds because the question comes up, especially with the events within the last year in Massachusetts and other places where everyone's afraid of the FDA and sales and the government. Are seeds legit to sell?
Right. The answer is no. I mean, there's not even a question. And the reason for that is because they're in the statute, at least in Vermont, it specifically says seeds. So that's why they do that, because that's what the statute says. Now, this is one of those interesting issues, though. I mean, prosecuting somebody would be next to impossible. I mean, every time I think about this, I think about the prosecutor in their office with a little seed and a plant on their little windowsill, if they try to grow that plant over the next 2 months to then possibly see if they can test it. I mean, that's the absurdity. So while the law says, yes, this is illegal, actually prosecuting somebody for that crime, I would say would be next to impossible to do. Which really puts, this is like, why do you have laws when they can't be enforced? Why do you have laws when they're that stupid?
Right. And they're getting crazy right now. One of the things I want to talk to you about real quick, and I saw this last night or the night before. I'm still trying to find some articles that go into it a little bit more. It looked like Colorado just decriminalized all drugs. Is that true?
Not to they may have passed a non-binding resolution. I have not heard or seen that, but I haven't been looking at Colorado lately. So I have a very hard time believing that. It sounds like something that, obviously, they've been talking about decriminalizing mushrooms within Denver and a lot of parts of Colorado. But there's also a lot of very conservative parts of Colorado, like Colorado Springs, and and so we're going to really have to kind of take a look and see. I just pulled up something to say that they've been defelonized in Colorado, so that is interesting. Effectively reclasses personal possession of Schedule 1 and 2 narcotics from a felony to a misdemeanor. So that's probably what you're talking about right there. And I tell you, I'm not familiar with this. I'm going to have to take a look at it and read it a little bit. But from what I just kind of pulled up, it looks like, they at least lowered the penalty, not and said this is okay to do, but you won't be charged with a felony, you'll be charged with a misdemeanor instead, which is definitely a better situation to be in. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to do my homework this week on this a little bit, and we'll talk more next week on it.
Great. I mean, something I think we should. We see Colorado really being the forefront of everything in this country right now, especially when it came to cannabis, as we know, and now with mushrooms, things of this nature. And they're literally kind of like the guys who are driving all the markets that we all look at to see what we can do or what not to do or how we should do it, and see what the effect will be across the rest of the country, being that, we've seen mushrooms legalized there. And, we have all these other states that are looking at legalizing. A couple of more articles I saw this week. Missouri has passed a bill to eliminate the medical cannabis license caps. Like, how huge is this for this industry, especially in Missouri?
It's fantastic. There's been a lot of questions in Missouri about the transparency of their system. So I think that was done in almost reaction to allegations of, some money under the table for licensing issues. So, but hey, if it works out that more people can have access to the industry, all the better.
No, I think it's great, especially when you release these license caps. And, we're not talking about CBD either here. We're talking about medical cannabis.
Yeah.
So if we can release the caps on it, I mean, it could really change the whole outlook for many states, and especially the dispensary systems, who have to work with caps, right, or pint counts or patient counts or certain things like that. Stay tuned for that as well. That could be another really great thing. Now we talk about Maine a lot, right? Maine seems to be they do things a little weird up there, right? We love Maine; they have great cannabis and great people, but it seems like the cannabis industry is always something weird going, right? We just see that they removed their residency requirement. Is this something that most of the people in most every state should do? I mean, why wouldn't you do this?
There's arguments on both sides. The local craft growers are furious. This is what we see in Vermont too. There's a very huge fear of outside interests coming into a small state like Vermont, like Maine, like New Hampshire, like any of these states. And there's a very, very strong feeling that residency requirements can solve that potential issue. And the problem is they're wrong. Residency requirements do not solve that issue. People simply just do workarounds. It keeps a lot of investment money out. Colorado was stymied by the lack of outside investment for a long time up until just recently. So there are ways to accomplish that goal. Residency requirements are not them, so I'm actually happy to see me away with it personally. I don't think the underlying issue is, unimportant. That does need to be dealt with. Just needs to be dealt with in a way that works, not in a way that gives lip service, but then actually, okay, you have to be a resident. So we get one person from Maine on our board of directors. We, incorporated Maine. Great, now we're working around it. I'd rather things be transparent, personally.
We've seen the workarounds in Vermont here with dispensaries open up with the capital, the corporations come in and buy it up without anybody really seeing it, right? We've seen it in Mass, same thing, where the residents would open up their stores and sell them in 2 months, right? The power of money is a crazy thing. So, yeah, it's interesting. And the thing you just told me makes me want to question this question is you just said that, some of these states that have this residency requirement are really suffering from investments being able to be brought into their state because their state just doesn't have that much investment capital within it, right? Is that an issue that we should talk about here in Vermont?
I think it absolutely an issue. It's one of the reasons our dispensaries are atrocious and they're falling apart. They're simply underfunded. They don't have enough money. Even the very slight amount, we have talked about, Fairleigh coming in, my emphasis. I mean, these are minor mistakes. We're talking, 5 figures, 6 maybe. Nowhere near enough to, support it. And because of our location count, because of the restrictions that we've had on it from the government state, combined with, again, poor management choices on behalf of the license holders, it's underfunding our system is one of the reasons our medical system is such a joke. There's lots of reasons, but that is a prime one. So when you can't have access to capital and you can't have access to money and you come from a small state where there's not a lot of capital inherently here, that's a problem. That's a problem that needs to be addressed and dealt with in one way or another. A lot of people who are, so ardently opposed to anybody outside of the state, I have yet to hear a good answer of, okay, well, how do we do this completely, within the state, without the capital necessary, without, it's unfeasible. Unfortunately.
Right? It really is. I mean, would there be a concern in Vermont that we would lose one of our dispensaries? I mean, I know the license isn't going to just resell them, but could IANTHUS pull out of Vermont just because, like you said, we don't have...
I'm guessing they already have. And yes, right? If the big money pulls out, in a lot of our dispensaries are not sustainable. They're not making profit. None of them. But we should go away with the medical. I mean, we should not have a separate medical program. We should have separate rules for medical patients so they have quicker access. But there's no need. We need an adult use and medical tax and regulated system We have the ability for patients to get higher quality medicine faster, but we don't need two separate systems. We need one. We need to move forward. We need to get this established. That's what's going to be best for the patients, for the state, for everybody.
Now, one of the questions we talked to Rick about earlier today was the effects of COVID, right? Like, we're all home, we're all streaming, it's a new world, people want to plant, people want to do this, people want to do that, because we're home, right? Now we're seeing states do the curbside, the deliveries. We just saw Massachusetts is allowed cannabis delivery starting on May 28th, which will be, that's huge for Mass, I believe, especially we talk to patients all the time that just can't get cannabis. Even here in
Holy fuck, Joe. I gotta go, dude. We gotta end the fucking broadcast.
They're out in the middle of nowhere. What do you think, if anything, will this open up a floodgate for a lot of states to do curbsides and deliveries? Like, will COVID push us to that point?
Brother, I have to end this broadcast. I have to leave.
These type of deliveries, and the sky will not fall. It's not the end of the world. People will not abuse the system. It can be done effectively.
I'm 40 minutes late. I have to go.
To prove that point, that all of the doom and gloom predictions from the prohibitionists that we hear every time we think about doing anything new won't come true. Delivery will be smooth. It will provide people with the medicine they need. It will provide adult use users with the cannabis they are legally entitled to. And yeah, I think it's a great idea.
I'm already fucking late, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I agree. All right, guys, well, it's 6 o'clock.
Sorry, I'm taking full responsibility.
Our producers have to get going. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. It was a great show. Huge thanks to Mr. Soul, Rick Campanella, the Brothers Grimm Seeds. It's a great story. These guys are what we strive for as far as quality, and people who live in the industry that have ethics and values and enjoy what they do. Guys, check them out, Brothers Grimm Seeds. They've Cinderella 99, which we all have heard of and had, and hopefully have tasted once in our lives. He's the godfather, I want to thank Brandon, Thomas for coming on again today. Another great show, guys. I appreciate you guys being here. Next week, guys, before we sign off, I just want to announce that we're going to have a really cool demo going on with Kyle Camry, who is one of the glass masters, man. He's one of the master blingers. So he's a great glass guy. If you notice some of the really higher ups in our cannabis industry as far as advocates, like Rick Nye or whatever, he's been blessed with some deeds. He's beautiful. He's live streaming every day, guys. So if you want to check him out, you can find Kyle Camry. He's live streaming. He does his demos. We're going to bring him on to the show and talk to him. He's going to just want to make beats kind of thing. Guys, any questions, comments, concerns? Light us up in the Weeds Prohibition Talk Radio. Vermont Cannabis Solutions, Vermont Grow Coaching. Hit us all up. We'll be back next week, guys. Stay tuned. It's going to be a great one. Thank you guys for tuning in.